Hello there, my name is Jonathan Blackburn. I'm a FIDE Master and I'm here to talk you through some of the first end games that you should learn when you begin to play chess. This kind of comes after you've learned how the pieces move and you kind of just learn what happens with the king. Check and checkmate. It's quite a difficult concept to grasp right at the start, but it's really useful to actually start to embed some end games right into the start of your learning. And here you'll see I'll put two kings on the board. The reason for that is because it makes it a legal position, so it could actually happen in one of your games. One of the best reasons to learn endgames is that it's one of the easiest ways to actually learn how to finish a game of chess. It teaches you about check, checkmate, and also that quite complicated, or not that complicated, but difficult one about stalemate as well, which can be a little bit different. So here I'm just going to run through a couple of the easiest endgames that you can learn, and you should be able to go away and practice these. You can practice these over a board, see if you can understand it. Probably the most important thing though is to learn what is check and checkmate and what is stalemate and what's the difference between these three rules. Okay, so here I'm going to give myself two queens and a king against the king. And I'm going to show you how to checkmate first of all, and then we're going to talk about what the rules are and what the differences are between those three things: check, checkmate, and stalemate. So here I'm going to do something called the ladder checkmate, and the reason why it's called the ladder is because these queens are going to be walking up this board as if you were climbing up a ladder. And this is how we're going to do it. Of course, in an actual game, your queens won't naturally finish in this position, but this is the easiest endgame to win. But you don't actually start the game with two queens, so you would actually have to get a pawn to the end of the board to get your second queen. But let's see how it works. So first of all, this queen's going to move forward, and it's sometimes a bit tricky with the queen, but this queen is covering all of these squares. It's also covering these squares diagonally. We're not too bothered about the diagonal squares in this particular case, but this is the box that this black king can move around. So the black king moves to the side, or somewhere. This queen now comes forward, and now it's this queen's job at cutting off the king. The king goes to the side again, and now it's the furthest back queen that comes forward. And you see that the two queens are attacking this king on the side. One's cutting it from coming forward. The other one is attacking it, forcing the king to go backwards. And then we can give another check. So the king is under attack, but it can get out of being under attack. And there's three ways of getting out of check, and that is to avoid, block, or capture. In this position, because they've only got a king left, the only thing that black can do is avoid the check. Again, they can't come forward because we've got this other queen cutting it off across this rank here. So it has to go backwards again. And then the furthest back queen now comes forward again. You see the queens again are cutting the king off. Has to go to the back. And then we finally deliver our last check of the game. First of all, is it check? Well, yeah, the king's under attack, so you can start with check, and if you're unsure, just move your piece there, and if you're attacking the king, say check. And then it's a case of working out, well, how can your opponent get out of it? So this king can potentially move to any one of these squares here in this particular position. These 5 squares, unfortunately, it can't go to the side because the same queen that's attacking it is actually covering all of those squares on the side too, so it can't go there. And it can't come forward because this queen is covering all of these squares in front of it. So there's no other pieces on the board to block the check to fit into these 2 squares here. There's nothing on the board to take the queen, like if there was a bishop here or a rook here or something. Nothing can take the queen. The king's not next to the queen, so it can't take it. And the king can't avoid the check. Therefore, it's not just check, it is checkmate. And actually, that's probably one of the easiest checkmates that you can have. The difference between 2 queens and the next checkmate actually isn't that much. So here, for example, if I, let's say, get rid of this piece and actually include a rook on it, instead, this is more common. This is what you're going to see. And actually, the queen and rook checkmate is probably the most popular checkmate that I see in junior chess. You take all of your opponent's pieces and then you try and checkmate with the queen and rook. And it actually looks pretty much the same as what we just did with the queen and rook. So again, we go up. The king moves to the side. We go up 2 squares with the furthest back piece. And here the rook is doing the cutting. So the queen attacks from the side. This is check. Can't come forward because of the rook. Goes up. Rook comes now to do the check. The queen covers. The rook attacks. King goes up. And like this and so on. And we finally get the checkmate because the king can't go any further up the board. Which is a shame for it. If you do this online, then obviously it's much easier because you won't make a mistake by doing any any dodgy checks or anything like that. So you're going to actually it's going to be a lot easier online for you, because the computer won't allow you to move your king past check. If you do this over the board, please be very careful, because one thing that I tend to see if I kind of put the position back to where we were is I'll see a position like this. Children will start like this. They'll move the queen forward 2 squares. The king will come forward. This rook will go forward 2 squares. The king will come forward, and then the queen will go forward again. And actually, all of a sudden, this king will stay around this area, and this queen and rook will end up somewhere at the top. And I'll be like, how on earth did you get to that position? That couldn't have possibly happened. And the reason is that actually what's something called an illegal move has actually happened. This king cannot actually move to this square in the game of chess because the queen is covering it. So it's not a case of can you sneak your king past. That doesn't actually work. You've actually gone against the rules of chess, which you're not allowed to do, and you shouldn't want to do it either. And just remember, when you're doing this, when you're practicing this with somebody, and I would advise you to do so, is that if you're the king, your job is to basically try and not make any illegal moves. Okay, mistakes happen, but you try and take it back and make sure you move your king somewhere safe. Try and make it as hard for your opponent as possible, and the only way to do that with the king is to try and keep your king, say, somewhere in the centre, if you can do. Because actually there's nothing that the king can do to prevent checkmate here if the queen and rook or queen and queen do it correctly. So these are the basic checkmates using the ladder technique. It does get a little bit harder. So for example, if we were to maybe switch the rook and queen around, so if we were to put the queen what I would call on the inside here, this makes it a little bit harder. Probably a good idea just to kind of have a think about it. If you're thinking, well, why does it make it harder? Then stop the video now, have a think. What is it? Why would that be any different? Because this queen and rook are still going to be going up 2 squares at a time to try and checkmate this king. And actually that would still work. So if this rook comes forward, let's say the king goes this way, we go queen up check, king can go upwards, a rook, check again, and it's just going to be check until we get to the end. And here it's actually the same. It looks the same. But the problem is that I didn't do the strongest defense with the king. The king actually made it very easy for us to give checkmates. Here the rook is covering, the queen is attacking the king, and it would attack the 2 squares either side of it as well. So here's how black can make it harder, and this is something that you need to think about and try and make sure you include in your practice sessions with this. Suppose this rook comes forward, and then let's say we move the king. Let's say that we do the same again. The king goes to that way, queen comes up check, king comes diagonally back this way, check again, king goes, let's say here, queen to this square, check, king here, rook to this square, check, and then king here. And now hopefully some of you might be noticing that there is a little bit of an issue here with this last move that white's going to do, because if white now goes up to here and declares checkmate, unfortunately it's not checkmate. And the reason is that the king can actually just take the queen. Which is really rather annoying. And this is the whole point of it. And you can actually do this a lot earlier on, further down the board. And the point is that with the queen on the inside line, so you see how the queen started on b2, on this inside line up here. It's actually, the rook actually doesn't guard the queen. Whereas when we had them the other way around with the queen on the outside, the queen was actually guarding the rook. So actually, even though it looks the same, it's not the same. So here the king can't take the rook because the queen would be on it. Likewise, when I say inside line, that doesn't necessarily mean having the queen on the left, because if we think about it, if we go back to, let's say, putting the pieces on the other side of the board, here we're going up the king side or the right hand side of the board, the queen is on the outside, so this is a safe way of doing it. Whereas if we were to switch these around, put the queen there, put the rook there, okay, let's say move this king out of check, here there's a little bit of danger, because if you go up 2 squares with your rook and the king comes close and you put your queen up to here, you're going to get your queen taken. So make sure you avoid that, and the best way to do that is just very simply switch them round. Queen across 1, check, let's say, rook back this way, and that just sorts your problem out, and you're going to be able to ladder up the board towards and get victory and finish off the game. Really important technique to learn and master. You can make it harder for yourself by starting the queen and rook in some random positions. Let's say put the queen, rook there and the queen up here. Can you get checkmate from this position? And the way that you should be doing that is going back to basics, back to doing that ladder checkmate, try and get the king cut off. As you get a little bit more experienced, you'll start to take some shortcuts in this. So for example here at this point, you could move your pieces up two squares if it was white to play, but also you kind of could, you know, cut some corners and move your rook all the way up here and save some time, and then your queen would actually come to this square next. But that's kind of advanced, and that's something that you should want to do when you've mastered the basics first. Okay, so all I've done there is very quickly run through the queen and queen checkmate and the queen and rook checkmate. We usually use a ladder technique for this. Hopefully you've learned about check and checkmate there. I haven't gone too much into stalemate. I'll go into that when we do the king and queen checkmate in one of the later videos. Thanks for watching. Make sure you click subscribe.